Look at all these slave masters posing on your dollar.
Chapter 2. The question at hand. What do I believe people are trying to ask when they ask, what is the meaning of life? Well, there are two major distinctions when it comes to the word life in this question. Are we talking about human life as it relates to everything else? Or are we talking about the overarching idea as life pertains to all the universe? It is here that I must differentiate the word life into two separate ideas: the reality of life as a whole and the reality of life as human existence as an individual. What do I mean by the term life? It's the condition that distinguishes animals and plants from inorganic matter, including the capacity for growth, reproduction, functional activity, and continual change preceding death. The most universal driving force of life I can think of is the process of evolution through natural selection. It seems that this force drives all the requirements under the definition of life. One could say that this is the meaning of life overall, since it is what continuously advances life. Does this mean that all life in general follows this concept? We don't know because we have not encountered life from other planets to test that theory, but evolution seems to apply to biological entities. Does the universe itself follow the process of evolution? I don't think so, but the universe is all of space and time, which is not a biological self-sustaining entity. So if you ask what is the meaning of life, and you're really attempting to ask the entirety of all reality, all space, time, life, and our perception of the outside world together, then I do not believe we can apply the concept of evolution. I do believe that, in context, we should include everything needed to support life and everything that we've encountered through our human experience though. All life on Earth is carbon-based and needs certain parameters in order to sustain itself. What if life evolved to meet a different set of parameters in other galaxies? So to speak about life this generally wouldn't be honest. From here on out, when I speak about life, I will speak about the known life that we have encountered. Now, the reality of human existence is much different than that of life more broadly. I believe that human beings are exceptional because of their reasoning and their ability to create. Human beings can transcend past a lot of their animalistic instincts. We can create systems of beliefs that help guide our behavior towards better outcomes than just pure instinct. From religion, government, to philosophy, human beings have developed systems of ideas and beliefs that can rewire or restructure the way we think. Now, this isn't the same exceptionality that leads many religions to think human beings are better than all other living things. Human beings are not the center of the universe. The universe was not created to be conquered nor serve humanity. It just so happens that human beings have this incredible ability to use their minds in ways that allow them to create and understand the world around them. So it's easy for humans to rationalize a universe in which they're the center of it. It's just as likely that human beings are just another speck of dust to the universe as a whole. Either way, any conceptualization of the meaning of life as it pertains to the human existence creates problems. Language is extremely important when it comes to transmitting our ideas. It's important that we try to break down our concepts to their simplest forms and start building a line of philosophy from that. The paragraphs above are meant to do exactly that, to break down the words that I will build ideas upon so that we can take this journey through thought together. For some, they want a simple explanation and will scroll through my defining of terms to look for the meat of my philosophy. This will ultimately lead them to different conclusions since our base starting point is not the same. It is important we start somewhere, and language is that point in which I'd like to begin. This is a part of steelmanning my position against criticism so that only valid criticisms remain. Philosophy is not easy, and neither is trying to explain the conception of new ideas with old world meanings and understanding. With that being said, language frames our ability to understand things within a box. Within that box is everything that we've been able to use language to explain. Outside that box are the ideas and things that language has not even begun to explain or conceptualize. Our use of language not only frees us from the burden of not being able to communicate ideas, but it also entraps our understanding of the world around us within that framework. We should be focusing on bringing as much of the outside into the box as possible, thus growing the box and our understanding of the world and universe. How big is the space outside the box? That is the beauty of language. No one knows. No one knows the limits to knowledge. But what we do know is that language itself limits our ability to obtain the vast amounts of it. Words and their definitions are never static. Their concepts should be refined to a more solidified and concrete version than yesterday's. We should be constantly challenging our ideas of these words, not to only better understand the concepts being defined, but to also further our ability to communicate these things through space and time. Chapter 3. The reality of life as a whole. I'd like to begin with looking at the reality of life concept. In order to understand where I'm coming from, one must reach a certain mindset. When you look up into the stars and try to think about how far you can go, how do you feel? Think about the expansiveness of the universe and everything we know out there. Think about the millions of planets and billions of stars that stretch farther than the mind can fathom. Now think about you and your individual plight. When you contrast the two concepts, that feeling you get when you realize your individual life is a mere speck of dust in the greater aspect of things is what I'm trying to invoke. You need to shed yourself, your physical body, and just try to exist in the universe as nothing. Think of yourself as an observer with no power and no actual physical matter, just floating through space and time as an entity observing. This is the kind of mindset one needs when they're trying to think about the reality of life, that you as a person doesn't exist. You don't matter. Float the farthest away from Earth that you can imagine and just observe the cosmos. When one wakes up in the morning and cracks open an egg to cook breakfast, does the vastness of the universe rely on you to do that? Does the cooking of that egg affect some far-off distant planet or star billions of miles away? Does the act of a human waking up have any bearing on the universe expanding? One school of thought would say yes, those that believe reality doesn't exist outside of an observer. So if a human being never perceived an event, then it never happened. This is one way God's existence has been justified. This God would always be able to observe everything. This allows reality to exist even though no human being is observing it. God observes it, and therefore it becomes reality. But regardless of your views on reality, these questions should be put into the mindset of how inconsequential their actions are in the totality of the universe. So anything about us as human beings cannot possibly have anything to do with the meaning of life in general. Now, a God being introduced can add some explanations in order to simplify the number of things we do not understand about the universe, but it doesn't bring us any closer to knowing the truth. By stating that there is a creator, we limit our ability to search for the answers to understand the meaning of the reality of life. Injecting a God injects human understanding into a universe that we have no real knowledge about. It's like when thunder clapped the skies and our ancient brothers and sisters attributed that to the god of thunder hammering away on his anvil in the sky. By attributing a human element, we have discarded 1. Any reason to investigate the matter further, and 2. Limited our ability to find the truth. Over time, we realized that there is no god of thunder, and that thunder was not him hammering on his anvil. While we do not definitively know what causes the sound of thunder, we have a consensus on it being the thermal expansion of the plasma in the lightning channel. However, if our ancient relatives never came up with that theory, how long would they have practiced that religion? How long before they began to believe it was natural elements at play and not supernatural? How many sacrificed animals and humans could we have saved? By injecting God into the argument, we severely handicapped our minds by limiting the possibilities and our creative imagination. We begin to look for evidence only to support the God hypothesis and thus may overlook evidence towards something that leads to the truth. When we remove all the notions of human existence and the idea of gods, what is left that helps us explain the reality of life? As I mentioned before, our understanding of evolution through natural selection helps progress life on Earth. But does this concept hold true for other universes? Do planets and galaxies evolve with the same intent that life on Earth does? What would be the end goal of a planet? To sustain life? To exist? Naturally, I want to ask what the purpose is, but asking for a purpose presupposes that there was a time in which it did not exist and it was created. When we go back far enough to the creator of the creator, we eventually end up at the Big Bang Theory. No one knows what existed before the Big Bang, and the theory only explains what happened after an event that set it all in motion. No one knows what happened to cause it. In addition, the Big Bang was not the beginning of the universe either. The theory does not attempt to explain how the universe began, but how it expanded. Time, space, and energy are assumed to have existed long before the Big Bang. As of right now, it's impossible for human beings to know what the reality of life is. We cannot assign any purpose since we do not understand how and why everything we experience was created to begin with. All we have is theories, and from those theories we can derive a sense of purpose, but we will never know until we understand the beginning. The beginning of what? Everything that exists to our knowledge. Why we even have a universe to begin with. Moreover, to clarify, I do not mean the beginning as if time or space can be deduced to these terms. It is possible the answer to this mystery is outside our current understanding of language. I use the word beginning as a placeholder until we have come to a better conclusion. I believe that trying to find the beginning may lead us into the same predicament when we assert that God created everything. We pigeonholed ourselves into looking for specific data points to prove our earlier assumptions. I know formulating a hypothesis is a part of the scientific method, but at the same time, we're trying to find an answer to a question. That question may just be the wrong one. Maybe the beginning is not necessarily the beginning because time or distance has no bearing on that concept. Maybe the concept exists in a component we haven't yet to identify, like a dimension yet to be discovered or theorized. Maybe the concept of time has not always been linear. These abstract ideas could be the key to unlocking our ability to study the origins of the universe. When we observe life in the deepest trenches on Earth, it begs the question of just how an entire ecosystem can be present and not even be known by the outside world. The outside world being everything above it. There are organisms here that thrive on the organic material that drifts its way down to the bottom of the sea. They exist in extremely cold temperatures with thousands of pounds of pressure exerted on their bodies. They exist in areas in which there is no light whatsoever, just complete darkness. Alternatively, when you look into the components of a cell and see all the organisms and organs that work together in order to produce the cell, which is then a smaller portion of tissue, which is then a smaller portion of an organ, and we can keep going until we have the human body. Does the inner workings of a cell have any conscious impact on our day-to-day life? Does that entire ecosystem living in complete darkness at the bottom of the ocean have any bearing on the world outside of it? What can explain the meaning of life, or the reality of life's existence? Is our universe akin to something like Horton Hears a Who? Is it that our entire universe sits on top of a needlehead inside of a bigger universe? Alternatively, are there multiple universes that exist with an unlimited amount of possibilities? How do we know? I believe that we may never know the actual truth when it comes to these questions, but philosophy is possibly the best place to start. To answer the question simply, we don't know. This uncertainty may cause some of us to feel nihilistic and may cause us to invent things like gods in order to mitigate that anxiety. However, this uncertainty should not be scary or cause us to act irrational. It is okay to have no answer. Finding the answers to these large and never-ending questions provides humanity with a journey. Maybe, just maybe, The meaning of life is to find the answers to these questions. In addition, with every answer, the goalposts move farther away, thus giving humans the same forward progression that evolution through natural selection does. The answer is the limits of our collective understanding of the world around us. If knowledge is a never-ending pursuit, then could the answers to the meaning of life run parallel to that pursuit? Moreover, when we ascribe meaning, we use our own understanding and context. What happens when all humans disappear from the universe? Does this meaning still hold true? Does this meaning require the human consciousness to give it value, or does it exist independent of it? If it requires the human consciousness, then it cannot be considered objective, which means it is a human construct. It is dependent on the human element and not the entirety of life as it exists without a conscious actor to interpret it. Therefore, I believe it is hard to tease out the differences between the two ideas. It is hard for us to imagine the universe without a conscious observer. It is this idea that leads us to the question of what is the meaning of life as it pertains to human beings and their reality.